yellow railway bus dropped me at the edge of fallow marsh just as dusk bruised the sky. Cicadas shrilled in the reeds, and a smell of iron rose from the wide, slow-moving river. The villagers back in Greyfield had warned me. Every stranger on the tavern porch, every child tugging at its mother's apron string. Yet I had insisted on coming. A missing sister draws a longer shadow than any cautionary tale. Go after her if you like, the innkeeper had said, polishing glasses with a rag so thin the lamplight shone through it. But no one crosses the Wern unless the moon bleeds, and when it does, no one returns. I had felt a chill then, but grief drives all colder things away. My sister Ellen had vanished 3 months earlier with nothing but a slip of paper left under my door. If I have not come back by the red moon, follow me to the ferry. The full moon was expected tonight, and some old almanacs predicted an eclipse, enough dust in the upper atmosphere to shroud it crimson. Neither omen nor superstition mattered. I simply believed Ellen. She had never lied to me before. The road ended at a weathered jetty. Thin planks, encrusted with lichen, reached like trembling fingers toward a ferry moored in mud-black water. It was no grand vessel, only a flat barge of warped cedar, but the air around it felt wrong, thick as syrup and shivering with a current beneath. And there was the child. He, or perhaps she, the figure was androgynous as a carved cherub, stood barefoot at the prow, a knotted rope around one wrist and a pole taller than his small frame. Dark hair clung to a pale brow, and the eyes wide, unblinking, caught the dying light like mirrors. When I tried to speak, the child only lifted a finger to his lips, a universal plea for silence. I glanced up. The moon, still rising, had not yet broken through the haze. Its edge was just a dull brass coin. Nightbirds wheeled above the reeds, and somewhere far downstream, a loon gave an eldritch cry. I sensed rather than saw movement behind me. 3 other travelers emerged, an elderly man in a frock coat with silver frogs, a woman swathed in widow's weeds, and a gaunt youth who kept his hands thrust deep in his pockets. None greeted the others. Each stared at the ferry and then at the horizon, as though comparing some private mental map to this physical place. The barge rocked, its only invitation. I stepped onto it first, brushing splinters from my palm as I steadied myself. The child nodded approval, perhaps, and the others followed. Boarded and balanced, we waited. Minutes stretched. The river lapped against the hull, sucking and drumming. Fireflies lit and extinguished themselves along the banks. Then clouds slid away, and the moon revealed itself, a full sphere drowned in rust. A blood moon, the newspapers would explain in the morning's mundane language of refraction and atmospheric ash. Still, as its crimson smear bled across the water, every hair on my arms rose. The mute child unknotted the rope, braced the pole, and pushed off. No one spoke. Words felt like stones that might tip us into the dark. The only soundtrack was the sigh of water against wood and the occasional creak of the barge's ancient ribs. Midway to the opposite bank, the child paused, pole held upright. The moon's reflection caught the river between us, 2 red orbs, one above, one below, like eyes of a hidden beast. A breeze stirred, carrying something fermented, river rot, or the exhalation of secrets too long sealed. The gentleman in the frock coat coughed once, then pressed a gloved fist to his mouth, as if to cork whatever threatened to come out. But a voice, hoarse and ragged, forced its way through his thin lips. "I took them," he whispered. "The charity boxes. 3 churches, 2 orphanages. I fed my own pockets and watched their candles gutter out." He slapped a hand over his mouth, aghast. "I never meant to. No, that isn't true. I meant every bit." With a sharp gasp, he stumbled to the gunwale. The barge lurched, but the child showed no alarm. The man stared into the river, pupils dilated like a cornered deer's. Then, as if bowed by invisible hands, he toppled headfirst into the water. There was no splash, a hushed gulp, more like wet cloth sinking in a basin, and he vanished. The river's skin smoothed over as though nothing had broken it. I made to rush toward the spot, but the widow seized my wrist. Her grip trembled. "Don't," she hissed. "It's begun." "What has?" She only shook her head, black veil fluttering, and the red light slithered over her face, revealing an expression contorted by equal parts grief and resignation. The youth shifted nervously, shoulders hunched. His shadow trembled across the deck like a marionette with cut strings. I noticed then a round bulge against his jacket, a flask or a bundle wrapped tight. His voice came out brittle. He deserved it, whoever he was. Yet his eyes kept darting to the water. We drifted on, slower now. The far bank remained remote, a blurred seam of cattails and alder trunks. It felt as if the river had lengthened itself, stretching the journey so we would have no excuse to escape what wanted to happen here. And then the widow's story spilled forth without warning. "They begged for a cure," she rasped, nails digging into the rail. "Every one of them, but I gave them laudanum and stilled their tongues. Mercy, I told myself. Mercy for them, more time for me, alone." She clapped both hands over her mouth, eyes bulging. But the confession had already been released, and it hovered in the air like a black fly seeking raw flesh. The child turned his solemn face toward her. A faint sorrow flickered there. No judgment, only recognition of inevitability. He beckoned with one small hand. She shook her head, step by reluctant step backing away. Then her boot heel caught between planks. She fell backward, in a rustle of crestcrete, and disappeared beneath the surface. Again, no splash. Only the river's quiet consummation of its due. I stood paralyzed, heartbeat a war drum in my ears. 2 gone, and the ferry hadn't listed at all. The river must be terribly deep. Or else something else was happening, something that made depth irrelevant. The youth began panting. I smelled alcohol on him, sharp and fraught. He clutched whatever he carried under his coat. "They never proved it," he muttered. "No body, see? Just her shoes, washed ashore. She should have listened. Should have kept her mouth shut. Are you talking about my sister?" The words ripped from me before I could weigh them. He jerked, startled. Moonlight turned his face the color of curdled milk. I don't know your sister." But his gaze slid sideways, and I realized the bundle wasn't liquor. He unbuttoned his coat, and a pair of ballet slippers, dripping, dangled from a looped cord. Bile rose in my throat. Ellen had danced since childhood, the soles of her shoes worn soft as chamois. I recognized that pale satin even in the half-light. "How did you get those?" He backed away, hands raised in shaky surrender. "I found them by the sluice gates, that's all." The child watched, eyes luminous. The pole made a soft tap as it settled against the deck, an accidental drum roll for what came next. The youth continued babbling. "She laughed at me, said, 'No, everyone always says no,' so I followed, just to scare her. She slipped, you see. Put my arm out to catch her, but she flailed and—" He swallowed audibly. "I think the rocks did the rest. Water carried her away. I never meant—" The sentence never found its period. He wheeled around, preferring the river's mute judgment to mine, and dove. This time an actual splash, weak and human. His head broke the surface once, mouth gaping, eyes luminous like those of a fish pulled up into daylight. Then something tugged him under. Ripples radiated, converged, disappeared. Only 2 passengers remained, myself and the child, whose calm grew heavier with every confession I heard. I should have felt vindicated. The man who likely killed Ellen had met his doom. Yet emptiness yawned inside me. Justice, when delivered by forces beyond comprehension, left an aftertaste of ash. The far bank was still a rumor. The ferry circled lazily, no longer progressing in any direction. I realized the pole lay abandoned. The child stood before me, palm extended, a silent invitation. For what? A confession? I had done nothing worthy of drowning. I began mentally cataloging my life, searching for hidden rot, a stolen candy bar at age 7, a lie to a lover about where I'd slept one night, ignored calls from a father ill with cancer. Minor sins, human sins, nothing that deserved this river. But the child didn't lower his hand. And suddenly I heard Ellen's voice in memory, bright and true. "Promise me you'll tell them the truth." I had promised. 3 months ago, the night she vanished, she'd come to my flat shaking, said a boy from rehearsals had been following her. She was going to the constable in the morning but feared walking home alone. I assured her she could stay. She begged me to tell the police if she didn't return by the red moon. Yet I had not. I'd folded her note into my pocket, convinced she would reappear, embarrassed to sound alarms. Yes? I began, half to myself, half to her. People went missing for brief, perfectly explainable intervals, I told myself. Why involve authorities and risk scandal to her dance company? Instead of protecting her, I protected her reputation, and by extension, my ease. For 3 months, I'd busied myself with paperwork, rehearsals, trivialities, rationalizing away the dread. The constable finally opened an investigation only when townsfolk found those slippers on the weir. My silence had cost time that might have saved her. I had not wielded the rock, but I had barricaded the path to help. The truth struck like a cudgel. I closed my eyes, felt tears gather, tasted salt. Then I placed my hand in the child's. Instantly the air changed, the river stilled to a mirror. The blood moon overhead quivered, and its reflection fused with the ferry's deck, red light blazing upward. I felt an undertow yank not from the water, but from within my chest, as though guilt had become liquid and wished to join its own element. The child's grip tightened. Bones finer than bird wings, yet unbreakable. He looked at me, not with condemnation, but with the weary compassion of one who has witnessed countless sorrows. His other hand touched his throat, as if reminding himself why he could not speak. Then he gestured to the pole. He wanted me to pilot. A choice, then: surrender to the river's appetite as the others had, or steer us onward with the weight of my confession acknowledged but not allowed to define the rest of my life. I thought of Ellen, her laughter, her stubbornness, the pride she took in balancing and point like a dancer carved atop a music box. She would not have me join her in the dark. She had wanted me to speak, to act. So I would. I nodded, pried my fingers from the child's and gripped the pole. It was heavier than it looked, waterlogged and cold. I planted it, pushed, and felt the barge respond. The opposite bank drew closer, shapes resolving. Willow saplings bending low, a shingled landing half submerged. With every yard gained, the river's sigh grew angrier, as if disappointed at being cheated of its fourth confession. But current alone could not override a determined hand. The ferry thudded into mud. I secured the rope to a post carved by years of redundancy. The child hopped onto land, beckoned me ashore. My knees felt watery, but they held. Upstream, the moon's red began to dilute. A silver rind crept along its edge, eating the stain. Soon it would be only a pale orb, ordinary and forgotten. "What happens now?" I asked, although I knew he wouldn't answer. The child pointed toward a footpath between rushes. Lanterns dotted it, flickering. In the distance rose the timbered silhouette of a house, one I recognized from childhood stories. The Ferryman's Rest, a hostel for travelers who crossed at cost. Understanding dawned. This night did not end at river's edge. It extended into whatever reckonings we shaped for ourselves once we admitted the truths we carried. The child had done his part, bearing us through confession. The rest lay in mortal hands. Before I could thank him, he pressed something into my palm. A small, river-smooth stone the color of old bone, striated with red like dried blood. A reminder of my sister, of this crossing, of the voice I almost let drown in fear. When I looked up, He had already guided the ferry back into open water. Alone now, he worked the pole with fluid certainty. The river accepted him, parted around the blade like silk. I watched until mist swallowed boat and boy together. I followed the lanterns, rehearsing the statement I would make to the authorities, rehearsing it until it carried no hint of self-justification. They might still dredge Ellen at some bend downstream. They might not. Either way, I would speak. A handful of yards from the hostel door, I glanced over my shoulder. The moon had turned silver, brilliant and remote. The river lay black under that calm light, offering no sign of the barge or its pilot. Yet I heard a faint splash, one final gentle dip of the pole, and then silence. Some secret sink, I thought. But the river is not the only water in the world. Words, once released, create currents of their own. They can drown, yes, but they can also cleanse. The difference depends on whether we let ourselves be carried under or learn at last to swim.